And we are the partners of Solarian Games. I'm Jason.
I'm Peter.
And we are joined this week by a special guest, Michael Witwer.
Thank you so much, Jason and Peter. Really excited to be here tonight.
So glad to have you. So let's see, what do we have for this week? We have got a couple of stories before we get into why we've got Mike with us tonight. Critical Role is going to be using D&D, not Daggerheart, for Campaign 4. And expanding to 3 tables, 13 players, all kinds of craziness. Wizards of the Coast has released their Exodus, the space RPG. And then the big story is going to be that the book that's been long awaited from Mike Witwer, Dragons, is out. So we'll be diving into that. But before we get to the first story, I'm going to do a plug. So give me a full screen here, Peter.
There you go.
There we go. Let's see. We have got a new book out for Top Secret. It is by Scott Congable. It is called Emunite Broadholly. And it is an amazing romp through a couple of different areas. You're going to be going through Madrid and a place in Russia that Scott can pronounce and I cannot. And Scott Congable is probably he's definitely the top secret administrator. He's run a campaign for longer than anybody else. He teaches us the rules sometimes, and he's been writing adventures for Top Secret now for a while, and we're starting to publish some of selected ones of those. So I almost wanted to call these the advanced series because he gets deep. He gets really deep. So if you like really crunchy, heavy, thinky, with lots of action, spy stuff, this will be up in our store on Monday or Tuesday. So we'll let everybody know when that's up.
Yeah. Yeah, Scott does the most spy stuff, even more so than us, I think, sometimes.
Oh, yeah, he's great. And he's probably listening right now going, shut up, guys.
Right.
All right. So let's jump into the first story. All right. So Critical Role's new season, I guess you would call it. Campaign 4 is coming up. Mike, do you watch Critical Role?
I wouldn't say I watch it all the time. I've certainly watched Critical Role. I know a few of the people on the show. They've obviously been such an important part of the resurrection, really, of D&D, especially during the 5e era when they came on the scene in 2015. It was hard not to get caught up in the winds of what they were up to. So I wouldn't say I'm a regular watcher all the time. Frankly, I just don't have any time to watch anything with any regularity. But if I did, I would watch them more. And I've got a lot of I'm just nuts about what they do.
You know, I honestly think that they are. Hear me out on this. In some ways, they are the steam tunnels of 5e.
Right.
That's very smart. That's very smart. I love that.
You know, for anybody who's listening, you know, Dungeons and Dragons was doing pretty decent back in 79? Was it 79? Was
1979?
Yeah.
We're going to the summer of 1979. The DMG was about to come out.
Mm-hmm.
The company was doing about $1 million a year.
Yeah,
$1
million a year.
$1 million a year in the hobby channel. So doing well, but not mainstream, right?
Yeah,
Jason?
They were still only third place in the SPI listing, in the strategy and tactics listing. So there was an annual listing that would come out every year, and Avalon Hill would be first and SPI would be second. Right. And then slowly TSR made it up to third, but they still hadn't broken through, right? And then this terrible thing happened with a student who disappeared, had nothing to do with D&D, but ended up getting blamed on D&D. And the next thing you know, it was all publicity is good publicity, and D&D just exploded, right? And it's kind of, I mean, Critical Role, thankfully, nobody had to go through any sort of tragedies for it. But yeah, I think it's been really one of the biggest reasons that Dungeons and Dragons has hit as big as it has lately.
I think that's really smart, Jason. I actually really love that analogy. And I'll say it's funny. It even kind of ports with the idea that AD&D was in full swing by the time the steam tunnel incident happened, right? And so they had just rolled out Monster Manual at the end of 77, beginning of 78, Player's Handbook in 78. DMG was literally rolled out actually like almost the moment that all happened in August of 79. Yeah, and so that's all happening all at the same time. You could argue, right? What is it? Let's track that a little bit. 2015, fall of 2015, the new rule set, the new basic set's out, the new Player's Handbook is out. And then
it's similar in that, you know, people were saying, okay, yeah, we can actually get into this more than the edition that we had before. There was some momentum happening for sure, but it wasn't explosive.
100%. I mean, because I think Critical Role started around maybe February 2015. So there had been a few months. They had this great rollout. But I will double down on one thing though, Jason. I would say they had 2 steam tunnel incidents for 5e. I think it was Critical Role in 2015, and it was Stranger Things in 2016.
Oh, yes.
Back to back.
Yeah.
That's what I'm forgetting.
That was a 1-2 punch, man.
That's what did it. I really think that kind of momentum year over year, I think it just made the thing bigger than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So it's been kind of weird that the Daggerheart folks who are I wrote down, what is their company called? Darrington Press.
Yes.
That they've decided that they're going to do their own competitor to D&D. They're doing Daggerheart, which to its credit is very different from D&D. You know, it's story first, it's emotion first. It fits the kind of people they are, right? You know, these are the theater kids. Right? You know, that's what we called everybody in college. It's the theater kids, you know. And so, yeah, it's interesting that they're doing this. And I've seen, I don't want to call it backlash, right? Just more kind of people questioning things a lot. You can't count on what you read on forums. Those are the people who go onto forums to type things. It doesn't mean that everybody else thinks that way.
No.
But, you know, there are people saying things in there like, hey, well, you know, I was thinking about Daggerheart, but, you know, if Critical Role's not even going to use it, should I even be playing it? But Polygon made a good argument, a counter argument to that. So I didn't write down the name of the person who was writing at Polygon, but I thought they made a good argument, which was, first of all, they're making some big changes anyway. So they have a new DM taking over. So it's going to be Brennan Lee Mulligan from Dimension 20. And I have to confess, I don't watch Dimension 20. I don't know how good of a DM he is, but I assume he's amazing. Right?
He's hysterical and brilliant. You know, and again, very different than Matt Mercer, but every bit as brilliant and awesome. Really great choice, actually.
Good. I mean, I will say this: if there's anything that Critical Role needs, it's a little bit more natural levity. I mean, I mean, this is just my take on it, but I feel like it's got a little bit of the look at me, you know, let's put on a show attitude to it that doesn't always resonate with me. So if there was a bit more kind of natural levity involved, I'd be more likely to watch it. So we'll see. But he's going to be running a campaign with 13 characters, 3 different tables. It's going to be huge. I mean, managing this is going to be amazing. And he's been writing this world and this campaign that they're going to be going through for quite a long time now, and I'm certain that it was written with 5e in mind, not with any other system. So it would be kind of difficult to ask somebody to just pivot to a new system with all of that in place. And the other argument that Polygon makes is that right now, Darrington Press and WotC, they're kind of in this uneasy truce or this Cold War or this standoff, right? You know, they're not really gunning for each other. They're just making 2 different products. And the last thing they want to do is go in and start just stirring things up and making it worse, right? So it probably makes sense, you know, like Molly Ivins used to say, you got to dance with them what brung you. So, and to add on to that, Daggerheart is already sold out. They probably don't need, you know, they don't need more sales. They're getting that. So it could be a smart move. But it was just interesting that, you know, that they're not going with Daggerheart for this season.
So I have a question, because the first thing that came to my mind, and you probably don't have the answer to this. I don't know if anybody does, but like, why is Matt Mercer not doing it this season? Like, do you think that there's any kind of divide going on in the background or something, or anything under the table? Or do you think he's just like, yeah, I just don't want to do it this year?
Well, he's playing in it. So
yeah,
he's
playing.
Here's what my personal belief is: it sucks to be the forever DM.
Yeah. Oh, I get you. Yeah. All right.
Amen to that.
Hey, that's a good enough answer right there. I mean, that would, if you told me that, I'd be like, yep, get it done.
I mean, I don't know that that's a fact, but I would guess it.
That would be
Maybe
my
one-
guess too. I mean, it's so heavy lifting to be a DM, let alone one on a big hit show that a gazillion people are watching. I can't imagine the pressure. I get freaked out when I'm prepping for my kids, playing Saltmarsh, you won.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what, so, yeah, I can imagine that there's probably a lot of good reasons. And a lot of people really love to see Matt play. They want to see Matt play more and more and more. So I think there's a lot of good reasons.
I can see. It sounds good to me.
It's funny. Saltmarsh is always the one I start every new campaign with if I'm playing first edition.
Okay.
That's funny, Jason, because that was my introduction to D&D was Saltmarsh. For whatever, again, back in the 80s, that was the first adventure I ever played. I've now run it for my kids. We're not quite done yet. They're actually on the seacoast as we speak. But no, there's something really magical. It's a wonderful introductory module, as is Borderlands and all those others.
Well,
but
it's great because the players, they can understand it. You're going to a house, you're not going to a dungeon or anything like that. It's pretty straightforward stuff. There's not a ton of lore you have to learn. And then as you progress through the different modules, you get to do all these different things. Like you said, there's the pirate ship and I guess they're pirates.
Yeah, no, they're pirates. Yeah.
There's assassins, there's pirates, there's all the fun stuff.
Wow,
Absolutely.
you guys got it nice and easy. When I started, I joined a group at the local library. That's the first time I played. I was on my way to school. It was 1980. On my way to school, and I saw this sign on the library door saying D&D Club. And I remember my brother coming back from college and telling me about this D&D game. And I'm like, oh, I want to try this. So I stopped at the library that Saturday, and they begrudgingly let me play. I mean, I know it's begrudgingly because over time I come to realize that, they were all high school kids, and here was this elementary school kid coming in. I was like in 5th grade. And anyway, so my first adventure, Jesus Christ, my first adventure was Barrier Peaks. So that was my introduction.
You must have had no idea what kind of game you were playing.
Well, seriously.
Well, we didn't start in the Barrier Peak, so we did start in the tavern, and we did do a few things, but it was like within a week or two we were in the Barrier Peaks. I loved it. I mean, I really thought it was wild, but yeah, talk about drinking from a fire hose, right? It was pretty crazy.
Well, it's funny because I was thinking about other people's first times playing, and Mike, I'm sure you've heard Merle Rasmussen's story of how he first played D&D, right?
No, I don't know that I've heard his story. No.
So, I mean, talk about not knowing, what you're playing. He first played it and had never heard of it before, had no idea what this was, and it just happened to be Halloween. So he thought it was a Halloween game because he's like, well, there's witches and vampires and monsters, so it must be just a Halloween game. It's just for that. And then he goes back the next week and they're like, no, we're still playing it. He's like, oh, okay. And he's like, so what should I do this time? And they're like, well, somebody has to hold the donkey because we're going to go up into this thing. You need to watch the donkey that's got all our stuff. So for the entire game, all he got to do was hold a rope and stand by the donkey. And he was finally like, okay, I don't think fantasy role-playing is for me. I'm going to write spies.
There you go. Well, hey, you know what? Good for all of us that they did that to him.
Exactly right. Yeah. If you'd had a better experience, he probably would have gone a different route, and there would be no Top Secret today.
Yeah.
So for Christmas one year, one of the things I gave Merle was I found a little miniature of a donkey. So I made sure to get him a donkey miniature.
Nice.
All right. So that's Critical Role. Peter, what do we got next?
All right. So next we got, and it's funny too, because we talked about this Critical Role story, kind of hinted on it before. And we've talked about this one before. We kind of hinted on this one before. This is Exodus. Wizards of the Coast releases Exodus, the TTRPG. And it's a book. Very, I don't know. Last time you said it was very reminiscent of Traveler.
Well, I was wrong.
But then
we had the word Traveler in it, and it fooled me.
But then we went back on that, and it's basically this is like a 1-2 hit. They're releasing Exodus as a TTRPG, but they're also haven't released it yet, I don't think, but they're about to the what do we call it, the CRPG, right? The computer role playing game.
The computer role playing game is coming out like in a month or two,
right? And so this art looks amazing, but anyway, so it's written by
like Chris Foss, though. To you,
it does. I love it. Yeah, it does.
So
it's written by James Olin. RPG and TRPG creator, co-founder of Archetype Entertainment, whose credits he's worked on Baldur's Gate and Dragon Age Origins and Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which is a awesome video game, one of my favorites.
So I had to look this up though. I'm going to interrupt you because James Olin, and I hadn't heard his name before because I don't follow video games, computer games that much. And so they were saying, this guy's writing the TTRPG, and I'm like, well, he's the founder of a video game studio. Does he know how to do these things? Yeah, he does. I did a little bit of looking around, and he has done a bunch of stuff. He did a bunch of things on the DM's Guild, funny enough, not actual Wizards releases, but so Heroes of Baldur's Gate, Chains of Asmodeus, several books. So he has got credits in this world.
Well, here, just real quick, then, if you want to talk about that, see, here's some of his credits down the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
So that's some of the stuff he's working on.
And actually, I don't know, maybe a couple of those are actually Wizards releases rather than DM's Guild. I kind of can't follow how much they release anymore.
Yeah, all right, it's true.
It gets a little confusing to me. So
anyway, so it's a kind of a beefy book, 296 pages, full color. So I've never heard of Smythe. Is it Smythe sewn binding? So I looked into
Smith sewn binding. Yeah, so
Smith,
the features. Okay. It's just a type of binding that
I know, but it looks
better.
Really nice. I looked it up. It looks like serious.
Well, enough TTRPG publishers have had their problems where books kind of didn't hold together the way they wanted to. So it's worth telling people this one's going to hold together.
Right. I think you could tow a car with. If you punched a hole in the 2 hardcovers, you could probably tow a car with the damn thing.
Nice.
But anyway, so it's got it looks like it's very well done. It's got a lot of good stuff in it. I imagine this is going to be a really good game. There's some of the features there's origins for characters. There's now it says 4 new Exodus themed classes. Now, why does it say new? Because that makes it sound like this is based on an existing game. Is this like a futurist? Is this like the what is it? What's the space D&D game? Is there Star? No, that's
Star Frontiers. No, so this doesn't have any.
That's something else.
It doesn't have any roots in any previous WotC or TSR properties.
So I wonder why they said that. Anyway.
But well, we'll get to that in a minute when we get to the character sheet, but go on.
But yeah, again, so weapons and there's armor, all this stuff. 6 powerful traveler dynasties, always good story stuff to build your world around. What else? So there's 2 books actually. Sorry, there's the Traveler's Handbook and there's the Encyclopedia. And then the encyclopedia, of course, has all the world stuff, but it has there's celestials and changeling and awakened and construct and human non-player, remnant eyes. So I guess these are all the different races you can play. So it's interesting that the races are changeling, awakened. I wonder what awakened is. That sounds interesting.
Well, so all right, game. I was digging through the art a little bit, and I saw things like awakened octopus and stuff. I think awakened is just their word for uplift.
Uplift, I get it. Yeah, okay, well, that's uplift. Very cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, so I have those books I did not buy the books or anything, so I haven't read through them, but I did download the character sheet to kind of get an idea, because that's a good way to find out about a game. If you look at the character sheet, this is 5e, is definitely 5e, because you've got all the same stats. You get intelligence, wisdom, charisma, constitution, dexterity, strength, all that kind of stuff. There is an archetype and a class. I think archetype may be the word for race in here.
Okay.
Everything seems very much 5e. It kind of reminds me of like what Starfinder is to Pathfinder, only Exodus isn't quite that blatant, because Starfinder is just orcs in space. They have literally got space goblins, whereas here at least seems like they kind of got their own world that they've created, and they're just using the 5e mechanics, which is good. If you want to give 5e players something to dip their toes into, give them a system they're familiar with. Right. So it's gorgeous. I'm certain this is not going to be hard sci-fi.
Maybe. Well, I don't know.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like it to me. It could be.
There it is. Awakened Octopus.
Yeah, Awakened Octopus. I love those guys. you know, it feels like it's got a bit of magic to it and stuff like that. So it could be fun. We'll see if this goes anywhere. Right now, it feels to me like a tie-in for the video game. Like they wanted to have a beautiful art book to sell for the video game and give people the chance to maybe play something when they decide they're tired of D&D for that weekend. But who knows? Maybe they're going to commit to it and really take this somewhere interesting.
Shoot, man, I might buy this book just for the art. It's got a lot of good looking art
Yeah,
in it.
it's a beautiful production as far as I can. When does the CRPG come out? Is that imminent?
I think it's another month or so. It's right on the heels of this for sure.
If not, they're crazy for not.
Oh yeah, no, it's right on the heels of this. I mean, it doesn't necessarily appeal to me. I love sci-fi role playing, but I like something that's got a bit more. I don't know. That's maybe a bit more hard sci-fi. This feels a little bit like a video game adaptation. You know, I mean, this is just me. I prefer art that is a little bit more soulful to it. But this is beautiful and it's worth picking up. And it's good to see Wizards doing something in space.
Yeah.
You know, other than just Spelljammer. So,
Right.
You know, so but I'm excited to see if they're doing it.
Yeah, let's see. That'd be interesting to see where it goes.
All right. Cool. Well,
All
those are all the stories we have for. Wait, there's one more thing.
There is
there's something more important going on.
That story. Oh, what is this?
All right. So, all right.
I don't know about more important, but thank you. I mean,
all right. Before we dive into this, I just want to kind of give some of my first impressions and you know what's going on here. So I haven't seen the physical book yet. First of all, tell me, is the physical book? Is there any texture on the cover? Is that?
Yeah, I didn't know myself till I got my author copy. It is textured. It's not as textured as the graphic, right? Like, so it's
you're not going to hurt yourself,
right? Those spines don't stick out, 3/4 of an inch, But so yes, this is all textured, which I was stoked about. I thought that's what they were going to do because I had seen the cover quite a while ago, but I didn't know. And in fact, it is textured. So kids and adults alike will think this is great. I mean, it really does stand out. It's gorgeous.
That's so cool. So all right. So we have the Book of Dragons, which is from DK. So first of all, should I call this a DK book or a Wizards book?
No, it's a DK book.
Okay.
It's an officially, you could say it's an officially licensed book that DK does under the guidance and the auspices of Wizards, and
Okay.
in fact the approval of Wizards as a licensed book. So they do work really closely with Wizards on every aspect from the outline to approvals and so forth. And what typically happens is Wizards will recommend an author, or again, in this case, DK knew me from a previous book I had done with both, which was The Legend of Drizzt Visual Dictionary.
Yeah.
And so we're all basically friends and we kind of work together on it. But it's a DK book, to be exact.
Okay.
It comes out from them.
Well, it was funny because I was looking at the PDF earlier and my wife came and kind of looked over my shoulder and she's like, that really reminds me of, what are those guys called? DK. And I was like, yeah, because I love all the stuff they do. So for people that aren't familiar with them, they actually do a lot of nonfiction things that are similar. So like they did one on visual history of machines. They had another one on just the night sky. And in all these cases, they do this amazing, beautiful kind of infographics and layouts that just kind of pull you in. There's one that I even used a little bit in our design of Top Secret. They did a book called The Ultimate Spy. There it is. Yeah. So they know how to do this thing. They've got great designers over there. They know how to put these kind of things together that really draw you in. Whether, in my opinion, whether you are somebody who's kind of young and doesn't have, can't necessarily get into the harder stuff to read, or somebody who's an adult and really loves the reading, it's kind of for both of them, the way that they do things. And so, what we have here is something that, to me, it harkens back to a lot of books that I loved growing up. So some of the things I was thinking about was, I made my notes so I wouldn't forget, and then I turned to the wrong page. There's a series of books called the Terran Trade Authority. Did you ever read those? It was these books that came out in the 70s and 80s. It was just all futuristic histories of space flight, 2 centuries in the future, and it had a lot of Chris Foss and other artists in there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Or there was another book called Barlow's Guide to Extraterrestrials that Wayne Barlow
I remember
did.
that. Yeah,
Yep.
I remember that.
Or even the Gnomes book, you know, like
Oh, I remember that.
one. You know, these things where you could take fake histories and make them feel completely real. And that's what I got going into this, is like all of a sudden all these dragons felt completely real to me. So I just, that's my first impression of what I'm looking at here.
All right, so we'll go to the first image here.
We got the dragon types. So yeah, I mean, just on a high level. So one thing we do. So actually, Jason, I'm really glad you kind of tracked that with. So DK basically, their signature is this kind of notion of it's not really so much on this page, but this notion of these big, beautiful full color layouts where they do annotations. The annotations. So they do visual dictionaries for everything, as Jason mentioned. Yeah. So this is the stuff that I think, as especially younger people, but us as grown-up kids, I guess too. Like you sit over and you pour over this stuff. Like, oh, what's with the eye of the red dragon? Oh my gosh, the wing leather on a blue dragon is kind of has these kind of cracks that make them look like clouds. Things like those details. Again, you think about it for an adult. Again, especially for someone who plays D&D or loves the lore. You might learn something really cool and think it's awesome. And then for a younger person, it's just the kind of details that, especially if you're the kind of young person that plays D&D or may want to, you just lose your mind over it. And I think we can all relate to that experience as people that probably used to pour over. You mentioned some books of your own, how we used to all pour over the old Monster Manual or the old Jeff Easley covers from the Orange Spine era. So these books have, to me, I think what makes them exciting to me is that they have that feel about them, is that they give an endless number of layers to especially a young reader. And again, this is not to rule out older readers as well, because the lore is legit here. But I will say it's just that the details are endless. And if you want to find about a wingspan or wing leather, wing membranes or claw size or any of these things, it's all kind of there in hyper detail with little annotations. I just love their style.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was absolutely doing that as I was digging around at this. I'm like, wait, okay, this dragon weighs 160,000 pounds. This one weighs 1.3 million pounds. What's that like? And all of a sudden, I'm looking up. I'm like, what else weighs 1.3 million pounds? And I found out that the gold dragon is basically the size of the Statue of Liberty.
Ooh,
yeah, that sounds about right. Well, yeah, and the gold. So the redesigned gold dragon. So this is a really fun part about this book. So there's a couple things here. So those of us who have played D&D for a long time, you might say, well, what about the Draconomicon or the next Draconomicon they did, or the Faerun Book of Dragons? There's dragon books that they've done, right?
Sure.
And then of course, most recently, you've got books like Fizzbands.
I was just going to ask about that. Yes.
You've got the Practically Complete Book of Dragons, which is actually like a more of a lore book, but kind of a short form one that's for even younger readers, I think, than this. So where does this fit there? Well, so I think at a high level, what I would say is that it's the DK treatment, first of all. So that in and of itself, I think creates the whole market for that, right? Yeah. So there's the DK treatment with dragons, but there's a level, what they can do, and I think this is where I give them a ton of credit. The people that work over there they just understand how to basically take different types of art. And again, a lot of this stuff is actually conceptual art that either hasn't been published at all, or it was published in some offshoot, like extra download that no one ever saw. And so they put it together in a new and interesting way. And then they kind of add their treatment, and I add whatever I can add in the words that I decide to write. And all of a sudden we've got something kind of new and fresh. And there's also, of course, a lot of new art in here as well. So at a glance, we try to cover all dragons.
Yeah.
That is to say, all true dragons. We cover the chromatics, we cover the metallics, we cover the gems and so forth. We cover all dragon kind. So that would be anything that's related to a dragon, whether it's a wyvern or a dragonelle or a spider dragon and so forth.
Oh, the spider dragon freaks me out.
Oh my gosh, that thing is stuff of nightmares, right?
Oh my gosh.
I
like spiders, and it still freaks me out.
So we cover all of that. And I think that one of the things that I enjoyed most in this is that we also, we covered like 30... we gave their own spreads to like 30 of the most famous dragons in D&D history.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, to my knowledge, hasn't really, so it's been done and it hasn't. So if you ever get one of the old Draconomicon, so one of the fun things for me, again, I approach these books, as you know, I've written some D&D histories in the past.
Yeah.
So I approach these books, at least for starters, the same way as any other history. The only difference is that you're not researching encyclopedias and history books and doing interviews. You're researching old D&D books to make sure you understand the lore, and you're going back to the source. You're not just taking the Forgotten Realms wiki. You're not taking their word for it, or even you're not just taking the 5e lore at face value. You actually want to dig back to some of these characters that might have 3 or 4 editions of history and figure out like where do they start and what else might I need to know. Now that's important because it's really, really common. Let's say one of these dragons came up in a recent D&D book. Fizban's is actually a really good example. Fizban's name drops a couple of these dragons and they're little quotes. They're these little like 2-3 sentence quotes, but they don't give you anything else on them. They're basically just kind of suggesting like, hey, this is an important dragon. But it doesn't give you 2 pages. It doesn't give you, 1,000 words on that dragon and all of the history of it and stuff. So what you end up doing is, like any other research, you end up digging back into these great old D&D tomes and figuring out what the history was. A lot of times, some of these go back to to Dragon Magazine, where Ed Greenwood may have written. Ed Greenwood wrote this column about these different dragons of Faerun, which ended up, I think a lot of those were ended up using in the Dragons of Faerun book. So it was just super fun to be able to do that research and that history, and then figure out the compatibilism aspect of it as well. Because one thing you realize, and you'll know this well, having worked on Top Secret and a lot of other things, if you really look at all of the stuff they've published over time, it doesn't always agree.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. So, so as I was looking through this, a lot of it, because I don't know all the lore, I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of the history. It seemed like a lot of it did line up with Fizban's. So, my first question before I ask any more about it is this in lockstep with Fizban's? Is there any divergence there?
Let me give me a second on that. I'm going to see if I can think of anything. I believe it is in lockstep with Fizban's mechanically, except for. Let me just give you a really superficial but important example.
Sure.
If you saw the Blue Dragon, the new designs for Blue Dragon, let's call it 5e plus, the 2024.
Nobody knows what to call it. Let's call it that.
Let's call it that. So the Blue Dragon, for example, has a single horn without a separate notch. Everybody that's known dragons for the last 30 years knew that a Blue Dragon has a single horn coming out of its snout, but it's got like a notch in it. Right? It's kind of this double horn. The new horn is kind of this single really sharp horn that's nice and smooth. So that's something you have to actually address when you're doing a visual dictionary like this. Yeah. You actually have to say like, oh, this horn is kind of used to impale, this and that. Not that they didn't do that with the old horn, but it's just a different look. So there's things like that you have to reckon with, especially when you've got the image looking you in the face, and you literally can't do an annotation to it that says, oh, it's got this little double notched horn, because it doesn't anymore. It's pointing to this single smooth horn. So, I mean, that's an example. But so to answer your question, I think more broadly, no, I don't believe there's anything from a mechanical or even a lore standpoint that would be out of sync with Fizban. Certainly not. Or even the practically complete, let's call it the 5e era. There's nothing that's out of sync with any of those things. I think what gets more interesting, though, is when you have to dig deeper into the history of the dragons and make that compatibilism element to make certain things compatible that must go or need to go, because there's all of this great history in there. And this is probably how they got here, but it's not always clear kind of what that line is. So I'd like to think it's a pretty defensible Book of Dragons that goes almost all the way back to 1E. Like I try to kind of take all that with me.
It does, and I really loved the way that, I mean, I know that Fizban's does a bit of this too, but I really enjoyed at the very beginning just kind of starting with the first world, starting with, where did we get, Orth and Toril and Eberron, tying all that together at the very start was wonderful. So here was my bigger question, my kind of meta question is, does WotC have a keeper of the lore? Is there anybody who is in charge of what's canon? Do they have a show Bible? Like, how do they handle 50 plus years of people who were not writing something with the intention of staying on message the entire time? How do they do it?
Gosh,
and who did you work with for this to get that right?
So it's a really great question. So I'd be lying if I said if I knew whether they had a single lore master. In fact, I'm pretty certain the answer is no, not a single lore master. I think they have lore masters. And my knowledge of this goes back to actually the first book I did with them, which was The Legend of Drizzt Visual Dictionary.
Yeah.
They absolutely had a lore master on that one.
Really?
Who worked in lockstep with me to make sure that I got everything right. Now, I know Drizzt well, but the level of detail that's required, and actually having seen some of their internal documentation about how they keep this all straight, and even what year DR everything happens. Now, consider Drizzt is probably even a better example, because on some level, dragons, there's something simple and beautiful about dragons. They live a long time. So whether it was 1373 DR or 1124, almost doesn't matter, because a dragon might live 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. It may not matter as much. Matters a lot in the Drizzt saga, right?
Yeah.
So when I saw how they keep their documentation around a book series like that, I was impressed as hell, if I'll be candid. I was pretty
What do
blown
they have?
away.
Like a big obsidian file, a bunch of index cards? What's going on over there?
But it's a spreadsheet. I mean, it's a spreadsheet that's got kind of different tabs and different things, but it's also got kind of a coherent timeline about kind of what to expect and where things fall, and even where things don't quite make sense or there's ambiguity around topics. Because, consider, you take, Bob Salvatore might go off and write something, but Bob doesn't spend all of his time obsessing over what the new books might say or might not.
Right.
He wants to be compatible with them, but these things all need to agree somewhere. And so I can tell you, when I worked on that, I actually got a dose of D&D lore that I did not expect, because they had these great lore masters. They had a couple people over there that I worked with that like knew inside and out the whole thing. And then they literally had documentation they could give me and say, hey, let's make sure this, and this. And then when I would write something, they would sometimes say, hey, this didn't make sense to that. I said, well, I thought it was. So it created really good dialogue. Now, on something like this, it was not nearly that coherent, partly because, in a weird sort of way, even though it's a 40-year book series, in the case of Drizzt, dragons go all the way back to OD&D.
Yeah.
They're all over the place. They're all in different realms. And in truth, a lot of them don't have a lot of deep lore. I mean, a lot of them really kind of, the lore is pretty superficial, because you could think about it, they really weren't really used as player character. I know there's options for that these days, but they were basically as enemies. They were just kind of what was around the corner. And so how deep do you really need to go on that? And some, of course, show up in books. So, right, those might have a little bit more meat on the bone. No pun intended. But so at the end of the day, what would happen is I'd put my stuff out there, and it would actually go into it would actually all go back to Wizards. I work with their head of licensing, and he routes it internally. So this one, it wasn't nearly as much a collaboration with their lore experts. But I can tell you right now, with certainty, there are lore masters in different things over there that keep pretty good notes. And again, I'd be lying if I said I saw a master sheet. I think Dragons is actually a little bit more. I think it's kept probably differently than something as cohesive as like a Dragonlance or a Drizzt, which has to be really, really tight.
Yeah. Have you heard from anybody else outside of that? Has Tracy Hickman called up and said, I'm happy with my dragons, or anything like that?
No, I haven't got any feedback from Tracy Hickman or anybody else yet on the dragons. Although we did get some of his dragons in there. I mean, again, obviously Dragonlance kind of recreated how we look at dragons in D&D. In fact, I even start in the opening, going back to the beginning, I wrote a little introduction about how one thing that's really wonderful and remarkable about D&D is that dragons don't really show up in the game in the original. They do. I mean, they're in the game. Don't get me wrong.
Right, but it is an interesting thing that you wrote about, when you think about what the name of the game is, and then
it's in the name.
But you can't really just run into one as a first level character.
Oh no.
Or second or third. Like, it's going to be a while before you see any dragons, right? And if you do, you'll probably get incinerated or lightning or whatever. But so again, I mean, we'll come back to Dragonlance later. So I started with kind of that awe, that this notion that dragons in D&D were always meant to be this aspirational thing, this phantom menace that was always around the corner. And that was the fun of dragons in D&D, is that the name is a perfect name for it, because you're going to be in dungeons. You're probably going to see dungeons from the word go, unless you, of course, play U1, right? Like you and I do, Jason. But maybe there won't be any dungeons there. There's catacombs below that. But anyway.
Or a spaceship in my case.
Or a spaceship, right, with ray guns in the first mission. Gosh.
Right.
But it makes sense for them to be this aspirational thing, because the scariest monster is the one that doesn't show up at the beginning.
Absolutely. But the place I started with this, just to give you a sense, as someone who's been playing D&D forever, who's in love with the lore, who's in love with the history, in love with the art. So I started this with, so I took Fizban's. So what you typically do when you're really working on modern material is you start with, of course, 5e or 5e plus, because that's your source of truth, right? That's the most recent thing published. That's the current game as we understand it. You might think of that's the amalgam of how we've arrived, and that's the source of truth. And what's been so great over the years, this is of course a recent change, but you had people like Chris Perkins who are looking over that lore, who's been looking at it for as long and longer than people than us. And so there was really good continuity, and there still is, with that type of material. So you had mentioned that I started with these kind of dragon histories. So one thing that occurred to me, because there was actually so much different lore about dragon creation from Io and Greyhawk and all these different, there was all these different themes around it. So I started with where 5e started, which was they had this thing called the Elegy of the First World. They came up with basically a system, not a system agnostic, but a realm or a campaign agnostic version of how dragons got here and what their deal was, at least according to the official Fizbans, right? And so that basically suggests that dragons actually pre-existed the prime material plane.
I actually hadn't gotten to that lore in my world. I hadn't seen that lore before, so that was fun for me.
It's really well constructed in Fizbans. I give them a lot of credit for. And to be truthful,
I had
think
to go back and read Fizbans because I didn't own it before this. So now I'm like, oh, look at all this stuff I didn't know.
No, it's really good stuff, and I believe it's net new lore. I mean, again, I'm sure if I asked Chris, he'd say, oh, I cross-referenced this, and this, but I believe it's net new lore to basically give a coherent framework with what is the deal with dragons and why do they have, why do they have this elemental magic power? Like, what's the deal with them? So they pre-existed basically Bahamut.
I had that was done in a Jerry Seinfeld voice, but yes.
Exactly.
What's the deal with dragons?
What's the deal with dragons? Yeah. So you've got Tiamat and Bahamut, which basically are primordial dragons, and they pre-exist the prime material plane. And according to the Elegy of the First World, what happens, which is basically this canticle, this kind of poem, what happens there is that the gods from the outer planes, the gods that we know.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. Who wrote the poems in the first two poems that the book opens with?
Oh, I wrote all the words in this book.
Okay, that was you. Okay.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Again, I was pretty pleased. I will say this, I'm very used to writing a lot of this type of stuff. When I realized I was going to have to write a lot in the voice of Tiamat and Bahamut and Sardior, in fact, I was, of course, really excited. But, you probably know this. And if and Jason, at least I know you know my work, and Peter, you may or may not know my work, but when I write D&D, I take it seriously, especially if I'm writing anything lore. I take this stuff unbelievably seriously. I think it's this incredible gift to be able to write it. And I do not mess around. I do not hand wave. Like, I go back to as far the beginning sources. I treat them as gospel, and I take it all the way through. And I say that only because, again, you could look at things like a D&D cookbook, which is one of the things I'm known for.
Yes, Heroes
and
Feast.
Say, oh yeah, like Heroes, right? Oh, it's light. They're doing, like, you wouldn't believe the kind of research we did to figure out what the hell they eat in D&D from the very beginning. I take it really seriously. I do not mess around, and so. When I thought about these challenges, I'm like, gosh, writing in the voices of iconic characters, it gives me absolute terrible anxiety and heartburn. But I also take it as a charge to try to elevate the character, be consistent with the character, move the ball forward with the character, do all of these things that I think, if you write for fandom, you have to, because let's be honest, we're called geeks because we obsess over the fine details.
Right.
And so anybody that doesn't appreciate and take those fine details seriously, I think is really, really asking for trouble. So in this particular case,
if I can, what I think works well about, I'm gonna focus in just on these first two of Tiamat's Lament and the Ballad of Bahamut, is that all that is evident, right? What you're saying is evident there. But what really sticks out to me is the economy of language in it. Is that it is very easy, not easy, but it's easy to fall into the trap of, I'm writing some lore for something fantasy and I'm going to go on, like for 100 pages of as many syllables as I can put into it. But in this case, full disclosure, Elmore Leonard is one of my favorite authors, so I really believe in his rules of writing, and this, it shows the lore, it shows the background, but it also, like I said, it has an economy of language that I really appreciated. And, not to embarrass you with praise or anything, but I just think you nailed it there. And I just wanted to point that out.
I am embarrassed with praise, but thank you, Jason. I'm delighted because, again, I don't know how these are I don't know how they're going to hit. I was really proud of them, especially being under duress. These books, I'll write a book like this in about 4.5 months.
Mhm.
And so
that is aggressive.
That's impressive.
Thank you. No, it's in my off time. I basically, 5 to 7 in the morning, and however many hours I meet at night after the kids go to bed is when I write. And a lot of the stuff, not to underplay it, but a lot of the stuff that I'm able to write, that's kind of this traditional, almost nonfiction approach to writing, kind of third party omniscient. I'm pretty good at that. I've done a lot of that at this point. Yeah. But then when you say, "Oh, write a 4-line poem about Tiamat's prayer for the blue dragon." No, these were all my ideas. Again, they basically turned me loose and said, "Write these in the voice." And I said, I'm not going to write a full dragon book in the voice of Tiamat and Bahamut. Right? You can imagine where that would go.
Oh my gosh.
But I'm like, what I will do is I will comment on these things the same way Fizzbands does. Again, a lot of these I'm just stealing these ideas about, but I wanted to go deeper on that. I didn't want to just do like 3-part, and Fizzbands is really cute and clever, but the Fizzbands, if you know it, will have these little, like, they're actually very Elminster and Volo. In the most recent books, they're these little kind of like just drop-ins that say like, "Oh, I ate a canary for lunch and boy, my belly aches." Like, it's just this really short stuff. And I'm like, okay, they've done that for Fizzbands, but let's get serious here. This is Tiamat and Bahamut. These are not
people. And Bahamut would be very upset if you ate a canary for lunch.
Absolutely. So where I started is I took the Elegy of the First World, which, by the way, is written omniscient third part. It's third person. It's not authored. It's not meant to be by any particular person. So I thought, I know what I want to do. I want to get Tiamat's take, and I want to get Bahamut's take on that Elegy of the First World, and I'm going to give them 2 poems right next to each other. One's going to be the voice I chose for Bahamut in this particular book was So remember, we've seen Fizzband. So if we current lore compatibilism, Fizzband, Paladine, Bahamut, these are all the same. These are all the same entity, right? And then it's Tiamat and Takesis and so forth, right? So what I thought is, okay, I'm going to make Bahamut. I'm going to lean into the wandering monk Bahamut, this Taoist, peaceful kind of Zen. Okay. That's how I voiced Bahamut throughout the whole thing. He's actually a creature of kind of peace and order, and going with the natural order of things. And this will make sense. That
really changes my perspective to think of Bahamut as sort of a Hote. I like that.
Well, and the reason was because it's much easier to get your arms around Tiamat, a creature of rage, a creature of disorder, and yet perverse order, because Tiamat is imprisoned in Avernus, and hell, of course, has a lot of order to it. So Tiamat was really interesting, but it was pretty easy to tap into Tiamat's rage and say, okay, we're going to put everything in verse, in rhyming verse in the case of Tiamat. Let's give Tiamat's point of view on the story. And that Tiamat hated the notion of how the Elegy of the First World came about, and that she felt abandoned by Bahamut and Sardior and all this, and that's how the poem kind of goes. And then you get Bahamut's take on it, and Bahamut's like, "This is as it should be. This went the way it was supposed to. This is how the winds blew." And so again, that's one of the aspects of Bahamut I leaned into here. And the beauty of these characters is you can lean into these different aspects because we've seen them. We've seen them in lore, and so and then Sardior right in the middle. Now Sardior, most people will not know Sardior.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you again because I don't know all my lore very well. So Sardior basically serves this mechanical purpose, of being the if you've got your chaos and your law and you've got your neutrality, right? Your mediator between them. But when did Sardior show up? I don't even know.
Yeah, Sardior shows up much earlier than most people realize. If memory serves, Sardior might even show up in either Dragon Magazine or at latest 2nd edition. Sardior actually has been around for a long time as a gem dragon. Gem dragons do show up in 2nd edition if memory serves. It might even go earlier than that if I dug deep. I read all of the stuff, so it honestly all runs together at this point. But Sardior wasn't. Sardior had a very different lore, completely different lore around him.
Well, let's explain how Sardior is in this book, so that people who are unfamiliar, so then we can go back to the lore. So
100%, yeah, thanks.
Put Sardior in the current context.
100%. So Sardior is the ruby dragon, the same way that Tiamat is the queen of evil dragons, or the chromatic dragon. The same way Bahamut is the platinum dragon. Sardior is the ruby dragon because Sardior is the god of the gem dragons. Right, and so we've got these 5 gem dragons the same way we've got 5 chromatics and we've got 5 metallics,
yeah.
and so we've ordered that out. And in the current lore, Sardior was the creation of primordial Tiamat and Bahamut. who are effectively brother and sister. And so of course it's ambiguous whether they made it or whether they created, but
that's completely in line with human mythology. With if you go back to any mythology that goes back far enough, there's always this sort of inconclusive relationships between, why did this Egyptian god mate with this other Egyptian god? Were they brother and sister? Were they the same person? Were they
right?
What were this happens so much, Marduk, and I forget who was the other, the anti-Marduk,
Yep.
So it really does kind of fit with mythology on our plane.
Well, 100%. And I think it really works well across any of the planes you choose, right, in the D&D universe, which is half the battle, right, is making sure you've got something that's agnostic across any realm or any campaign you have to play.
What would fantasy writers and game writers do if some physicists hadn't come up with the idea of a multiverse? We'd be screwed.
So it's a really good point. Well, again, it's a good question whether was it a physicist or a fantasy person, because the physics is now supporting the fantasy, right? Of that, like more and more physicists are like, "Hey, there's a multiverse, everybody. We're like living in it right now." So,
and all the authors are like, "Thank you. I really needed something to tie that up."
Right.
So again, they put out there some really cool lore that I was able to lean into, and actually I'd like to think move the ball forward. So Sardior being this true neutral right in the middle, Sardior is a creature of intellect, and so Sardior is all about psionics and telekinesis and powers of mind, and Sardior is all about humor and riddles. And so the way I framed it and the way I plugged it all in was that Sardior was created to actually advocate between the opposing forces of Tiamat and Bahamut.
Oh, you put that in.
I don't recall whether I inferred that or whether I actually just put it in directly, but it seemed implied because they created Sardior.
Nobody had explicitly said that before.
I'm not sure I don't think so. I think I probably inferred that because the implication with the creation of Sardior was that he was there to help Tiamat and Bahamut populate the first world, the pre-prime material plane, with dragons. And Sardior was a key part of that. And because you have these two kind of antithesis forces working, Sardior, as this true neutral, could help hold them together. And of course, when the outer gods come and invade the plane, Bahamut is defeated. Sardior is literally shattered, literally and figuratively, and Tiamat is left fighting kind of on her own in rage. And so it all falls apart kind of once these things shatter. And so as a result, you have these two opposing forces. But then you have these gem dragons out there who are mysterious and weird and extremely rare, who again are, according to the lore, kind of imbued directly with almost shards of Sardior, who's basically kind of this ethereal being that's been spread throughout the universe, is kind of how it all comes together.
Playing all the years I played D&D, I don't think I ever had a character fight a dragon. I don't think we ever fought a dragon, ever.
You know what?
I mean, we did, but we kind of left D&D about 6 years, maybe 5 years in. We had played other stuff in between, but I think after about the 5th or 6th year, I think we actually never went back to D&D really, like full on back to D&D. But
so Peter, to your point, I've been playing D&D for 35 years, I guess. We just fought our first dragon a couple months ago in my campaign. Well, partly because you have to have characters that have advanced far enough to even be in the. So it was a green dragon, and it was in. I'm happy to share. It was in the Adventure Castle Amber, which we're still playing. We're not quite done with yet, but my brother's been running that for us, and so we finally fought a green dragon, and I'm happy to say defeated it. But I had never once fought a dragon in all of these years of D&D, which partly flavors, again, my introduction about dragons don't come up that often, even though the game's called Dungeons and Dragons. But isn't it a great thing that they're around the corner, that they're over there?
Well, the hardest thing for me after all of these years is that at this point, I'm not sure that my character would want to fight the dragon. I don't mean, I'm afraid that the character would be afraid of what would happen. It's just that I've learned too much about them. It's kind of for the same reason that here in the real world, I won't eat octopus.
Yeah, me neither. I won't either. And I used to love octopus. Once
and then
I
I
learned
found
it,
out just
and I was like, nope,
smart they were.
never
Yeah, they're
again.
like smarter than we are. Yeah,
I think so.
it's not
Yeah.
not saying much, I know, but it's still. I mean, they're
Not saying much, but not for
Low
most
bar.
of us. But so this is the fascinating thing about dragons is that when you write a book like this, especially, I think the big difference between the book that you've got here and say Fitzban's is Fitzban's has got stats and it's got mechanics and all of that. So if you pick that up, first of all, it's a wizard's book, so you pick it up and you're like, it's a game book. I need to know how to fight this dragon. Whereas this, you walk into a Barnes and Noble, somebody who doesn't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons sees it and says, I like dragons. I'm going to read it.
Mm-hmm.
So now what you've got is something that has to not just be in conversation with the Dungeons and Dragons lore. Now you're in conversation with people like Naomi Novik and Terry Pratchett, So have you read Naomi Novik's Dragon series?
I have not, but it's
Okay.
on my list.
Yeah, I 100% recommend this to anybody. So for anybody who doesn't know, Naomi Novik, who I think is one of the greatest authors working today, insanely prolific, and one of her many series is called the Temeraire series, and it is essentially it's like historical fiction. So it's Napoleonic era historic fiction. Everything is very accurate. I think that Admiral Nelson is well represented. Everybody else, there's only one difference: dragons are real, and so they form
just a minor thing.
Yes, so imagine dragons in the Napoleonic era. So you had a navy and an army. Now you have an air force, and all these other kind of things come into it, which is the question of what even are dragons. Are they humans? Are they pets? Are they horses? And how do they integrate into society? And Terry Pratchett asked the same kind of questions. When you had these baby dragons and going up to the real ones. So you have all of these different literary traditions and people who have done things, and somehow those literary traditions do converse with each other, because the authors read each other. And so when you put this into the mix, it now becomes part of that conversation. So how aware are you when you're doing this about that conversation outside of D&D?
Well, yeah, I think you have to be right, because D&D, God knows, didn't create dragons. Dragons have been around over 1,000 years, thousands of years in mythology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's something, I don't know, there's something obviously almost in our humanity, I feel like, that needs dragons, right? There's something about that. For whatever reason, they have survived, and honestly, they are. I don't know if it's just almost the pinnacle of pure unadulterated power and fear and majesty. There's something about the idea of dragons that is not the same. There's a lot of great, chimera, and there's all kinds of different fantasy creatures, but dragons, something about, like, again, they're the biggest thing in fantasy. Even today, half the fantasy shows we watch circle around dragons. Again, no pun intended. And what is that, and why is that? So I think you have to absolutely pay attention.
There's weird sort of archetypes that transcend cultures. So, little wee men. That's one of them. In every culture, there's some wee men that are hiding in the bushes. And in every culture, there's some ghosts, there's some spirits. And in every culture, there's a dragon.
Yep.
Whatever form they take, whether it's Quetzalcoatl or a Chinese dragon or a European dragon, somehow all of these things are in our human unconsciousness. I don't know what to call it.
100%. Now, I will say, to answer your question more plainly, though, Jason. So, do I pay attention? So, I read as much fantasy as anybody, I'm sure. Yeah. So, I would say I have a good, solid awareness of dragons. Now, D&D dragons, of course, are unique and are meant to be just that, right? So, I do always need to be mindful that, you don't necessarily actually go take something from somewhere else, because D&D dragons were set up very specifically, as you know, by Gary Gygax and others a long time ago. And you've got the chromatics, who tend to be evil and they follow Tiamat. You've got the metallics, who follow Bahamut. And then, of course, now you've got the gems, which, again, emerged much later, and they've got now a more coherent kind of lineage around them. But at the end of the day, D&D dragons, even the breath weapon that they use, or the fact that metallics for whatever reason can shapeshift into humans and be in their form, and they have 2 different breath weapons, all very specific stuff. And it's not just mechanics. Like I actually think it's lore driven. I really think this notion, let's give you an example, the notion that a metallic dragon in D&D, which is again kind of a fundamental force of good, they all have different kind of skills, and the fact that they all have like a non-violent version of their breath weapon, like a repel weapon, is really interesting, right? Like, and so I'm like, okay, so that's probably the lore somehow dictating what the mechanics end up doing. And so that's where you do look at what other dragons are doing, and you don't ignore it. I mean, I just have a general interest there, but I will say you do try to stay within the books, because again, I don't want to get loose and fancy free with that, because as I mentioned earlier,
you're not introducing new lore, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I would say that's generally true. Although maybe going back to what we talked about Sardior, I think they do. I've worked with wizards long enough that I think they do give me running room to make inferences that make sense within the lore. And so whether it's exactly how Sardior sits in the dragon cosmos, or even the voicing I'm writing, with, again, they didn't have to approve that I was going to write Tiamat this way and I was going to write Sardior this way and I was going to write Bahamut this way. But again, I could justify why I wanted to do it that way, and I could stand behind the notion that this is an aspect of Bahamut. This is an aspect of his consciousness, and so by doing that, again, I think I get to move the ball forward a little bit. But I also, again, I get a lot of heartburn. I really try to stay within the walls of what has been laid out before me, because otherwise, then I'm just not being a good steward of this lore that 50 years of people have put out there that I have an incredible respect for. So. And then I know about, again, having worked on Top Secret, about respecting that lore and also trying to move the ball forward. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Although in our case, it was a little bit different, because when we did the new edition of Top Secret, one of the things we had to do legally is I told Merle, actually, I didn't tell Merle, I told Jackie, his wife, I said, I need you to take anything of Merle's books from back in the day. You need to lock them away. He's not allowed to look because we didn't own the copyright to that old stuff. So we had to say, you can't even look.
Yeah, it's smart. That's totally right.
So
But-
I've oh, go ahead. Just
No,
I was
please.
gonna say, I have a question that I've always, and I'd like to get your opinion on this, because you wrote the book on dragons. So one of the things that's always kind of agitated me about dragons, that's the wrong word, not agitated. It has been sort of like in the back of my head, has sort of like bothered me a little bit about the concept of dragons in a world. Because in D&D, especially in D&D, they, dragons are intelligent. And so they and a lot of times they're smarter than humans in a lot of ways.
Most of the time. Yep.
So if they're much more powerful and they're smarter, why aren't they more prolific in the world? Like, it's almost like they're a thing you may encounter at some point, maybe. And in some stories, it's the last dragon or whatever. It's like, all right, so how did humans win? How do humans ever like get any distance on these guys? Shouldn't they be ruling the earth? So I just wanted your take.
Shouldn't we be their slaves?
Yeah, what things are in place to keep dragons from being that?
So there's a couple of things, some of which are very crunchy lore. I'll talk about that in a second. Some of which are something very beautiful about the notion of the short lives of humans and the cooperation it takes to get anything done and to actually move the ball forward in humanity, right? Figuratively and literally. So dragons, whether they did this with intention or not, dragons are notoriously solitary creatures. Chromatics can't get along because they're extraordinarily arrogant, right? They basically hate each other. They hate their own kin. Chromatics, that's chromatics. But even the metallics are so quirky and puzzling and solitary that most of them have nothing even forming even close to anything you would kind of equate to a community. And so as a result, and then you take that and you take the notion that they're kind of pseudo-immortal, right? They're not immortal per se, but they're
3,000 years feels immortal.
It's close enough.
Right. And so they have these different kind of age bands. If you're over 800, you're an adult, or you're an ancient, then you become a great worm at a certain point. And great worms, like, it's hard to even figure out dicing whether is that a god, is that not a god. That stuff's not all that important, other than to say, I think they have a very different view on what humanity really means. And so let me just step back for a second. It's almost like the notion of, and I think Middle Earth kind of kind of nailed this pretty well. This notion that like elves don't worry about the day-to-day worries of what a human worries about.
Right.
Because an elf is kind of a pseudo-immortal in that. And they're like, they have all these squabbles that humans do all these things. Why? Because they're ambitious and they need to do something before they go because they only have 80 years. And here we're sitting here with 800, in D&D at least, 800 years or 1,000 years. Dragons have a little bit of that same thing, is that they're in no rush to do anything. They're, you know, again, they're notoriously attached to their homes and their hordes. I don't think they have any questions about their supremacy over regular mortals. But again, they're solitary and they don't really cooperate by and large, right? Like, so even with the metallics, the only notion of a community, there's a couple of like things in place, like gold dragons have the king of justice, who's like the king of dragons, but even they have to come together in these councils, you know, from time to time to kind of make decisions. Then they all go away across their various planets and they don't work together to build anything. So there's something to be said. It's a long way of saying there's something to be said that humans, having these short lifespans and no strength and minimal intelligence, the fact that we can get together and those that can actually learn to cooperate can actually build something much bigger than themselves. And in fact, conquer a whole planet that dragons exist on. Even though, again, the dragons should be kind of ruling everything. Now, again, I'll just throw in there are some other mechanics they've put in over time. There's a thing called the Rage of Dragons that happens every so often. This is Faerunian lore, but there's this thing called the King Killer Star that zips by Faerun every so often. It's Halley's Comet for Faerun. And every time the King Killer Star passes over Faerun, dragons lose their mind and they actually go insane.
Wow.
And it's a whole thing. I
did not know any of that.
It's a whole thing. And so
like they're Pon Far, right?
Actually, yes. And the notion of it, or one of the theories around it, is the idea that, I don't remember if this was like a Netherese thing that was created, but the idea of it was that this is one of the reasons, to answer your question, why dragons can't ever get it together, is because every so often they lose their friggin' minds. That a lot of them go crazy. They fight each other. They can't ever get it together. And this happens once in a while to all dragons, not just chromatics, but also metallics. So there's some lore reasons why it's the case. But I think the more beautiful answer is kind of like, these are these huge creatures that, think of it this way. To feed a dragon, you might have to have 20, 30, 50 square miles of land to yourself to just feed yourself. So you really can't live near your nearest dragon kin, really, to be able to even have enough like food to kind of support you. And so they take up this big kind of resource footprint, you might say. They're also really solitary. The chromatics hate each other, can't get along. The metallics are always fighting the chromatics anyway. You can think of a lot of good reasons why these groups, they just can't ever get it together to actually like unite to really take over the planet in any meaningful way.
That sounds, that makes sense.
In some ways, if you think about it from a excuse me, from an ecology perspective, there is, I don't know if you know about the kakapo of New Zealand. There's a bird in New Zealand called the kakapo. And what's interesting about the kakapo is that before humans ever arrived in New Zealand, you have to understand, every continent, every landmass on the planet began as an actual piece of land, except for New Zealand. New Zealand just sort of showed up. It sort of rose up from the ocean, and there was nothing there. And so there were no animals that are native to New Zealand. The only animals that could get there were birds. So the birds fly to New Zealand, you know, hundreds of thousands of years ago. And they get there and they're like, what a nice little piece of rock. There's nothing that hunts us. Why don't we just go ahead and eat some leaves? And, you know, this whole flying thing that we did to get here, we don't really need it. So the kakapo, but before the humans arrived, were these fat, round little birds that just hopped around. And it was interesting because they forgot how to fly, but they also forgot that they had forgotten how to fly. They thought they could still fly. So the kakapo would sort of jump out of a tree and go, oh, and land on the ground. So you have this island with no predators and just these fat little birds that have forgotten how to fly.
And the Eye of Sauron, of course, looking around.
Exactly.
Peter Jackson, and yeah.
And so evolution would say that you're in trouble. You're about to overeat and you're going to overpopulate. And so the kakapo had this bizarre evolutionary adaptation, which is that they were terrible at reproducing. For example, the kakapo, when it's time to mate, the male kakapo sings a special song that they sing to try to attract the female kakapos. And this song, first of all, is not loud enough for most of the females to hear. They're too far away. And if any of them are nearby, it turns out the female kakapos hate that song. So as a result, the kakapo does not reproduce very often, and you don't get very many of them. And that's how they survived from an evolution perspective, is there just weren't too many of them. So they managed to make it until, of course, the humans showed up.
Right, and that was the end of that.
And it's a good thing the kakapo doesn't know Just the Two of Us by Bill Withers, or there would be a lot of everyone would love the song. There would be a lot of kakapos around.
Oh my gosh.
I've never heard this. This is fascinating.
Search for so Douglas Adams wrote a book called Last Chance to See, where he went around and saw animals like that. And afterwards, Stephen Fry went and did some, because he was his best friend, so he did some things like that. And there's a video of Stephen Fry going to New Zealand to find a kakapo, and the cameraman, the kakapo finally shows up and decides the cameraman must be a female kakapo and tries to mate with him.
Nice.
But that's kind of what I'm thinking of. Or okay, if you know Isaac Asimov's robot series,
sure.
When he had, or actually I guess this was in Empire as well. But anyways, there were these people, the Solarians, and that's actually what we named our company after.
Yeah, I love that. Love that.
So the Solarians lived on a planet where you had approximately 5,000 people on the entire planet, because they simply were too powerful. They couldn't live too close to each other. They just lived with their robots. And that kind of is, when you say that about the dragons, I think about Isaac Asimov's Solarians. You know, you just, or the kakapo, you just can't have too many of them.
Jason, we're dragons. We're dragons.
Yeah.
No, that's probably a better analogy I think I came up with. That's exactly right. I think that's how I think of dragons. And I think there's something really kind of magical and even poetic about the notion that they're out there. They're way more dangerous than anything you can handle if you're any type of humanoid or mere mortal. And yet you don't run into them very often, thank God. But again, they're out there and they're just part of that world. And I think it's a really remarkable and magical thing.
I think there's also another thing I was thinking about would be like, you take ants, right? Take us and ants, and we live in two different worlds, and we don't even like pay attention to each other's worlds until they collide. So like, we have our house and our yard, right? We think it's our yard, right? But there are millions of ants living in our yard. To them, it's their yard.
Yeah.
And so they're going about their business doing their thing, and we're going about our business doing our thing. And if I was an ant, I would think, oh, this great giant continent of a land, and we have the one giant that lives here with his giant family, or her giant family, or whatever, however you want to put it, right? And they have these beasts that run around and poop places, you know, but you know, we have our kingdom of ants, and we've got to watch out for that other kingdom of ants over on the other hill there. So it could be something like that as well.
Yeah.
We're not trying to
beyond the dragons are just beyond us.
Yeah.
So they don't need to rule us, because I mean, what you're saying, I was thinking about this the other day. I was sitting outside. We have a little pond on our property. And so I was sitting out by the pond, and I noticed there was a hole just about that big, tiny little hole in the dirt. And all these bees were flying in and out of it. You know, that was their home in there. And I was just watching them, you know, doing their thing, doing their bee thing. And I think that's kind of how dragons look at us. Like you're saying with the ants, you know, they don't need to rule humans, because I don't need to rule the bees. You don't need to rule the ants.
Right.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, especially since the humans grow all those delicious animals that I snatch up from time to time, it's really great, you know.
Unless of course you're a red dragon, in which case it's the humans that are the delicious treats.
Right.
Absolutely, but they can eat it all.
Hey, they make those. Hey, they make a lot of those too.
All right, I want to ask you about some specifics now, Mike.
Yeah, 100%. Let's do it.
All right, so I want to talk about Draconic Script.
Okay.
All right, so before I get into Well, actually, let me ask you a
Yeah.
real logistical thing. So the Draconic script that you have in the book, who designed that?
That is, let's see. I don't know who designed it. It is from a 5e book, and I'm trying to remember which one. But it's been like it's either.
Oh, okay. It
Yeah. No, it's like
existed
from like
before.
the DMG or the PHB from 24. It's been
Ah.
around. Like yeah. But I do. Yeah. I mean, there it is. Draconic.
And how do you pronounce Iokheric?
I think Iokheric, I think, is how.
Okay.
So it's Io. It's funny. Io is the dragon god of like
Blind
Greyhawk
Io.
mythology.
Yeah.
And so I think that's actually where the name comes from, but it actually doesn't really apply much. We do cover Io in here, like briefly, but again, that's one of those pieces of dragon lore. Got nothing to do with the elegy of the first world, which is what we lean into a little bit more. So you address Io, but you're like, this is another dragon god, but maybe Io was the progenitor of even Tiamat and Bahamut, but we don't know. But that's why the name is what it is, and I believe it's Iokheric.
So here is the question that I have for you. All right, so I see that dragons have hands, sort of. How do they write? What does a dragon pen look like in your mind? How does a dragon write this stuff?
That's a good question.
I basically want to understand the opposable thumb theory of dragons. Help me out here.
So dragons do have hands. Dragons have arms and hands, right? You've got wing arms, which are literally what they're called. And if you look at a dragon wing arm, by the way, it's like a bat. It's like a bat wing, right? It's got this long thumb,
well,
and
that's the same as what a wyvern has, right?
Precisely. Of course, wyverns don't have regular.
They don't have the other ones.
Precisely. And it's funny because the design has changed over time. So historically, especially if you go back to like 1E, dragons have 4 legs, right? It's 4 legs, and they're more dog-like, and they're down like that. But over time, as things have changed, and I think 3rd edition was one of the biggest changes when when Todd Lockwood did this big set of kind of new dragons, and they're more and more formed as kind of almost not bipedal, but more upright, and they have something more resembling arms with opposable thumbs.
Yeah, right.
And so again, this is lore that does need some compatibilism because it's changed over. I'm just calling it what it is. It has definitely changed over time. So to answer your question about how a dragon might write, now I'm not sure if I know the answer to that, but I've seen Pete's dragon.
Oh, you got to come up with something.
Well,
I'm putting you on the spot.
In Pete's Dragon, which is not a D&D movie, it's a Disney.
Pen looks like. I want my characters to find a dragon's pen.
It's probably it's like a stick they grab and they blow fire on, just like Pete does, and then he makes a tic-tac-toe board on his belly so that Elliot can play with him. Pete's Dragon, that'll make sense to you.
Yes.
It's the black dragon that spits acid, right?
The black dragon spits acid, correct.
All right. So I picture black dragon, I picture him just taking his claw, dipping it in some acid, and just scrying it into something.
Oh yeah, like one of those scratch boards.
Yeah,
like that.
And just burns it in. He's like, hold on. Yep, there you go.
Yeah. So in truth, Jason, I don't think I've ever seen anything about how a dragon might write. In fairness, I don't think I've ever seen anything on it, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I know myself, and I'd have to really think about it about what might make the most sense. But
I want to see that.
They have the hands to do it. They definitely have the coordination to do it. That's not an issue. But they're probably writing like tree-sized things. Like again, like my Elliot in Pete's dragon. Oh, sorry, Pete's the kid. Elliot's the dragon. But anyway, neither here nor there. But yeah, I mean, I imagine there's probably a few different ways they would do it. But there's no.
They sum up their kobold scribe. Scribe, come here.
There you go.
Oh, but a griffin feather. A griffin feather would be a perfect pen for them.
Oh,
Think about that. Everything scales up.
It's funny because one of the notes that I wrote to myself as I was reading through the book was, I feel like more than ever before, the dragons now feel feline to me somehow.
Ooh, okay.
Because you talk about dogs and you talk about cats. You got the kobolds who are obviously, dog-faced kobolds. And
Yeah.
But if you've had both dogs and cats, you know that cats are much more dexterous with their front paw. We have a cat who just walks around like he's using hands.
Yep.
Right. But there's something about the art that was chosen for this or the way they were described. or the solitary nature or the arrogance of dragons or something, that when I got done with this, because of course we know dragons are not reptiles, they're warm-blooded,
Right.
And I've basically decided in my headcanon that dragons are somehow related to cats.
Dragons related to cats. Well, from a technical standpoint, I don't believe it is so.
No, not technically.
But you mean like from a design and like, yeah, no. So I would completely agree with you that the way cats will paw things and use their claws and stuff, current dragons are way more like that than they are like dogs. I totally agree.
Imagine a dragon playing with his prey.
Well,
100%.
Well, here's another way to think of it. So when you see a dog lay down, right? A dog kind of and I'm a big dog person. I got 2 of them in the back here.
Dude, I love your dogs. You know that. Every time, awesome, every time I stay at Pete's house, the dogs stay with me.
Yeah. So, but when a dog lays down, they do look like they get kind of comfortable and stuff. They roll up in a little ball. But I have never seen another creature lay in the look more comfortable, no matter how they're laying, than a cat. A cat could lay on something that is shaped like this and they look comfortable. I can see when I look at dragons, at least the modern drawings of them and how they're depicted and stuff, I feel like a dragon could lay on anything and be comfortable and would just kind of melt into the shape of it.
Well, like a horde, for example, which can't be that comfortable, man. I mean, think about what's in a dragon's horde usually. And they have to find a way, and they love it.
A dog would have to dig out a spot to lay in.
Let's get into dragon hordes while we still have time, because I know we're running a little long tonight. So this is what's fascinating to me, is that both chromatic and metallic dragons and gem dragons, all dragons have their horde.
Yes.
It's not a moral judgment.
Mm-mm.
If anything, it's the. I mean, look, I've got a horde. Look right back there. Look at my my vintage computer collection.
I was going to ask you about that. I'm obsessed with whatever is over your shoulder. Like vintage computers are awesome. I grew up on a Commodore 64 myself, which I know some of those are.
I've got a Commodore PET right about there.
That's brilliant.
So
I love those.
Yeah, you and I will have to sit down and have a vintage computer talk sometime.
Well, no, you have to educate me. I'm hardly an expert, but I love vintage computers. They're awesome.
But the point is, we all have a horde. Like Michael, I don't know what your personal role-playing game collection looks like, but I imagine you've got a horde.
I could show you some things. I got them not too far away, but we can get there. Yeah, I got some things.
So that's what I'm fascinated about, is that the idea of a dragon horde, obviously it predates D&D, but I'd love your take on it. Yeah,
so it's definitely so it's a nest, for lack of a better term. It's a nest, but it's one. So it's one thing that happens with a dragon's horde from a lore perspective is that the lore becomes suffused with the dragon's magic. It's an extension of the dragon itself over time. So as it grows its horde, the dragon is actually spreading out its own essence. And it's one reason why in again D&D lore, a dragon knows the minute its lore is horde is disturbed. It knows where every piece of treasure is. Like, there's all kinds of things like that, and it's because it's not just a nest. It's a physical embodiment of them spreading out in a particular area. It's where they rest best. It's where they're most dangerous. Again, even in D&D lore's mechanics, they actually have special lore power. They have keep learning lore powers. They have horde power. Yeah, they can do special things when they're near their horde. So I think ultimately they made the horde more than just they covet things. That it's in their very nature to collect certain types of items. And again, all the different dragons have different collections that they gravitate to for whatever reason. But once they grow that horde, it's not just stuff to them. It's actually a part of them that is spreading out in a particular area and charges them up and is suffused with their own magic and life force almost. That's
what? I think at that point I've realized that dragons are just a embodiment of nerds. We are solitary. We don't want to go out, but we want to stay home with our horde.
We're not good with other people.
I think you just solved it. I think you solved it. That's it. That's what dragons are.
All right. So I'm going to get to my last logistical question. And this might, I don't know where this lore comes from. This might predate you by decades, or it might be new.
Most of it does.
But when I was looking through the dragon gods, Io, Tamara, etc., I hadn't heard of Garrix before.
Yep.
Obviously, that looks like Gygax to me.
Yep.
So please give me the background on Garrix, GarYX. It couldn't look more like Gary Gygax.
No. So it's a creation of Gary Gygax. My recollection.
Oh, was it?
It's the god of flame.
My ignorance comes forth. Please.
Yeah, it's the Greyhawk god of flame. Again worshipped as a draconic god of the red great worm, we call it destruction. Sorry, I can't remember. The god of fire. Yes, the god of flame, the god of fire. And it's a Greyhawk. It's a Greyhawk god. It's absolutely
Gary name it?
I believe Gary named it. I don't know that.
That's a little egotistical. Okay.
Well, but I mean, Gary did a lot of that type of thing with a lot of his early characters in Greyhawk and stuff like that. He changes, and obviously he does it throughout his career. Castle Zagig. Well, Zagig is not only a Greyhawk god, but then there's like a Castle Zagig later that they do with castles and crusades. So Gary's done that a lot.
So many of the early names were just like places in Wisconsin reversall
that too.
Or Jim Ward, Drawmidge, or or whatever, or all the terrible, all the things they did to sort of get back at each other when they would like make fun of another person by putting their name in it, right?
Totally.
I didn't know that about Garrix, and I just wanted to check.
That's I would say whether he created it, I would say very, very likely, because it's a Greyhawk god. But I can't say I've got a manuscript that he says, I'm going to create this god that's named after me. But very likely that is what happened, because he did that with a lot of things.
Nobody writes it down, but when you read about Egg of Coot, and you're like, he cheats people,
EGG. But Gary Gygax.
And
all right, so
in the Barrier Peaks, there's on the second level, the one of the maintenance areas, in the maze there is an EGG.
Yep. So he loved doing things like that. And to your point, Jason, a lot of the early TSR staff loved to do things like that. So no, I don't think there's any I don't think there's much mystery about where it came from. Only the fact that did one of his compadres name it after him, or whether he named it himself, that I don't know.
So Mike, when are you going to create something named after a person that you're annoyed at?
Oh, that's a good question. I got to work on that. It wouldn't be annoyed. I would do it in honor of. Let me put it that way. I would do it in honor of.
So if I come over and I like unplug your refrigerator, you're not going to name something after me?
No, Jason, I don't think I'll do that. But there is a great dragon named Elliot from Pete's Dragon. I keep mentioning, which was one of the movies I grew up with. So there you have it.
So yeah, this, like I said, I absolutely adore what you did with this book. As I said, it really fits into the tradition of books like Gnomes and Guide to Extraterrestrials, something that you can pick it up and you can read it through cover to cover, but you're really going to get the most out of it by just letting it sit there, flip to a page, and just absorb the details. You can kind of just keep getting into them. So
we used to call them coffee table books, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Absolutely. Well, and again, firstly, thank you for letting me talk about this. But again, I have to tell you, just really candidly, you never know what you're going to get when you write, a book for a publisher. You don't know until it shows up on your doorstep, which this one did a couple of weeks ago. And I was blown away. I was candidly blown away about the production of it, the way DK put it together. And again, I'll look forward to actually getting you both some hard copies out there if you don't have them already, because the book is just an impeccable production. I give all the credit in the world to the people at DK who really make this book as gorgeous and incredible as it is. I just write the words, and I write a lot of words, and I'm pretty proud of what I got in there. But at the end of the day, again, they deserve so much of the credit.
I love DK. Absolutely. It's funny. I always lament the fact that these days there's no record labels that you can just count on to always put out music you love. Back in the day, there were record labels. If you knew that if it was a Wax Trax or a 4AD or a Mute or a Factory, you're going to like it. And thank goodness there's still book publishers like that. DK, they put it out. It's at least worth picking up.
Well, I mean, and again, I know we're at time, but like a spread like that. So there's the new Sapphire Dragon. It's insane. It's like, so I'm like, look at the
Is,
annotation.
is that new art or is that from
It is.
somewhere else?
That's new art. There's an artist that works for, it's a concept
Gorgeous.
artist named RJ Palmer that works for Ubisoft, and freelances for Wizards and DK, and put together all these new gem dragons. And they're out of control. They're ridiculous. Here, I mean, here's another one, like the crystal dragon, like the detail on this thing.
Yeah.
It's insane. This forked tail, like the whole thing. And so again, they really went above and beyond, like creating a hugely beautiful book. And I was just like thrilled to be part of it, honestly. Now I have to digress for a second though, because I just, as an old school geek, I just have to tell you. So I think you're gonna love this. So I've got a feeling we used to all, Jason, you were saying earlier, some of the books you used to pour over, but we're longtime D&D people as well. So I bet we all spent some time looking at some of the old illustrations.
For sure.
So, one of my hopes is, to modernize this kind of idea. So I used to, of course, look at the old original Monster Manual and all the old Jeff Easley. Again, I talked about those Orange Spine books. So you're going to love this. So my son, who's about to turn 9 years old, my younger son, I've an older one as well. My younger son, who's about to turn 9 years old, he's been looking through all these books. He asked for his birthday, he asked for a first edition Monster Manual.
Oh, nice.
Now, I have all the Monster Manuals. I have all of them.
Yeah.
But I have to say, there's something. So one thing that's beautiful about this is, like, you see all the detail. It's fully realized art, and it's remarkable, and it blows your mind. And I know how much I love it, and how young people would. But on the other side of the coin, there's something amazing about the David Sutherland and the Dave Trampier and these really early D&D artists that I don't think anybody would say they were mechanically as skilled as some of the later artists.
True.
But there was something they were trying to do in that art that captures your imagination in a way that is so visceral. Like, you look at those old black and white drawings from the original Monster Manual, and they just blow your mind, because I think they get you imagining in a very different way. And so I was so excited that my son, who's been looking through all these books, he wanted a 1E Monster Manual of all things. So I'm excited to pick one up for him. Not a first printing, no, but a later printing. You know how the collector market is these days. But so anyway, so I thought that was so cool, because I was reminded when I saw that it's not always about just beautiful, good art. It's art that is trying to, I'm going to quote my friend, our mutual friend, John Peterson here. The artists that were always trying to play the music in their head.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they could do it with complete mastery, who knows? But the ones that were trying to play the music in their head, there's something so exciting about that when you see it on the page. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out as a little anecdote, because I thought it was cool.
No, I think that's 100% right what you said about, like, Sutherland and Tramp, because the Velvet Underground was not technically as good as some of the greatest musicians today, but it's not about that. It's something else. It's something ineffable, and I just agree 100%. I agree 100% that there's just something that you get from the soul that you put into it.
That's it. And so again, we can do that with modern stuff, and I'd like to think I've done it with this book. But there's something, those old books have so much soul in them, they can't stand it. And I think it's probably one reason why people still collect them. They still look at them to this day, and there's something still so amazing about looking at Dave Trampier's Stone Giant from 1977. And thinking, like, I don't know what it is. So anyway, just putting it out there. Everyone knows how much.
Oh, actually, Mike, I got this since the last time you saw me. But here's my new. There's my new Tramp piece. Can I get?
Oh my gosh!
Can I get?
Oh my gosh!
You gotta break your arm.
Wait,
whatever.
I love it.
Oh man, what was that place that was in Lake Geneva? What was that place that John would always book a hotel room in?
Oh, the Baker.
The Baker. We gotta
go
to
the Hotel.
We gotta.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I had if you don't mind, I know we're late on time, but I got one question. It's something that came up when I was doing Cube of Death, which we're working on being a Tiz but a Scratch. One of the questions I can't. It's a trivia game, so it's basically a trivia RPG. Play an RPG, and you defeat monsters and stuff with answering trivia questions.
Love it.
And one of the questions, and they're not D&D, they're all over the place. All nerd questions, any kind of nerd question. One of the things I came across was kind of an obscure dragon that I asked about. Is one of the questions about the steel dragon, and it seems that the steel dragon gets there's a lot of, I don't know if it's a lot of controversy, but there's some controversy, and like I've seen on posts and stuff, like the dragon they tried to hide. Do you know what the deal with the steel dragon is? And anything about that?
I don't. I ran across the Steel Dragon, of course, when I was doing all of this dragon nonsense. I'm unaware of any kind of controversy or why the Steel Dragon, among other dragons, didn't survive. Again, there's been a lot of dragons they've come up with over time that did not survive the test of time. And unfortunately, no, I don't know what the history of that one is.
Yeah, I don't think it was kind of like, I think it was like maybe in one of the dragon magazines, maybe it was somewhere it made an appearance, and that's pretty much it. Like it never went anywhere after that. And I don't know if it was just kind of like somebody was like, that's a dumb idea, and so they just never went on with it or whatever. But I don't know. I thought maybe you might know some kind of story.
No. And again, I'm probably not a terrible person to ask, having just been through this process. But again, I do recall running across it. But again, not being in the current pantheon of dragons, not being in the current lore of dragons. Really, again, starting with those 5e materials and going backwards.
And that may be the whole
point of study.
That may be the whole story. Like that might be why there is no story, because there is no story.
Yeah, like, right. Sometimes
it made an appearance somewhere, and then that was it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, Mike. So I'm going to now ask you the question, which I hate when people ask me, which is, what are you doing next?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for asking, Jason. Well, I don't hate that question at all. It's all good. So, I've got my regular job that I do things. I work in I kind of work in marketing and content creation for a healthcare company. That's my regular kind of gig. But I do have a couple books on the docket. Not a single one of them has been released yet. So I can tell you right now, I'm working on 3 books right now. I will tell you that 2 of which are in the kind of D&D fantasy type of space. One of which is it's kind of a middle grade anthology type of book, I guess, for lack of a better term. So unfortunately, none of them have been announced, so I can't talk about a single thing, which I hate being that guy. But I'm that guy. So, but I've got 3 books on the thing right now. So I'm writing a lot of stuff, and I'm just loving it. This is the work that I love to do. Again, because I work my regular job, I do have you might say the luxury of I only work on books that I want to work on.
Yeah.
And that I do think tries to keep at least the work pure and fun. And like, again, if I don't want to do it, I don't do it to I don't do cash grab books, I guess, for lack of a better term. So
that's fair. That's fair. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next. Absolutely love this. Encourage everybody, pick up the physical book, get that texture. Get out there, get that feel. All right. Thank you for taking all this time with us.
This is
tonight.
A book you buy. You buy this one, like the physical.
All right. Thanks everybody for hanging on with us. Those of you who are Patreon subscribers at a certain level can join us in the Discord afterwards for the after party. And I don't know, what should you do? You should like, subscribe, comment, do all those things that help us out. Mike, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Delighted to be here. So fun to talk to you guys. Of course, I could talk to you for hours. It's very clear to me. We could just start our conversation on Commodore 64s and Apple IIes, but we'll leave that for next time.
Well, I'll find out which con we're both going to together, and I'll bring something to show you.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you all next week. Mike, hang on for a few minutes after we close this. And this has been Tabletop Weekly for, what was it, number 58? Oh my goodness.
58.
Look at that. We don't miss a week. Nope. See you all next week.